Seymour, this man. Yeah, funny though. Okay, so I too am going to be talking about coffee in 17th century London. I'm going to be looking more at kind of the effects of coffee on society rather than the coffee house. Coffee first came to England in the late 16th century. By the mid 17th century, there were said to be around 3,000 coffee houses in England. And at this time, coffee houses were for men only, which is something that was customary throughout Europe. In England, they were seen as a cultural melting pot, which was vital for the Enlightenment to happen. So they were a place for men to meet and discuss politics and the emerging sciences. Prior to the rise in coffee houses, many business and social meetings would have been held in taverns, which meant through the course of the meeting, those involved would have become drunk, and therefore less progress would have been made. Through holding meetings in coffee houses, many elements of modern business were founded at this time, such as the insurance industry, which was founded through ship owners and underwriters meeting in Edward Lloyd's coffee house, and ships were insured, which gave birth to Lloyd's Shipping Insurance, a company that still exists today. Prior to coffee, beer was the drink of choice because its brewing methods would have killed off many of the bacteria and diseases present in the Thames water at the time. Coffee gained popularity as it too was safe to drink, as it would have been brewed in large pots above a fire, which would have killed off any harmful bacteria in the water, such as the cholera disease. In 1670, Robert Morton published a pamphlet called The Nature, Quality and Most Excellent Virtues of Coffee, which discusses many of the health benefits of coffee, as well as informing the readers of its origins. Morton begins by establishing where coffee sits within the four humours, whether it is hot, dry, cold or wet, and he says that it must be hot because they say, coffee doth help digestion and the gout, scurvy and hypochondriac winds, which are true, but if it were cold, it would be so far from curing those diseases that it were even enough to breed them. For diseases are cold, and experience teaches us that cold things hinder digestion. Likewise, cold things causeth sleep. And we know that coffee has quite the opposite effect to causing sleep. He backs this up by saying, I affirm it to be hot and dry, because opium, which is cold and moist, is taken when they have drunk plentifully of coffee, for they are contrary or opposite to the other. For cold things dull the brain, and hot things quickeneth it. And again, being something that we now attribute to the caffeine within the coffee. Therefore, because coffee is hot and dry, Morton says that it drieth up moist and waterish humours, expelleth wind, and provokes the stool. It strengthens the liver by being moderately binding and cleansing. Whilst we still believe today that coffee speeds up the rate of the human metabolism and could therefore be said to provoke the stool, the fact that it strengthens the liver, as well as helping those with dropsy, jaundice and scarring of the liver, are more likely to be a result of the side effect of drinking more coffee, being a reduction in the consumption of beer. Of the effects of what we now know to be caffeine, Morton says that in the brain it helps all cold, moist and drowsy distempers, such as lethargy, apoplexy, catalepsis, trembling, melancholy and pains in the head. And as an added benefit, he says that the steam from coffee is good for curing noise or deafness in the ears. We now know that coffee, due to its repression of antidiuretic hormone within the body, increases the volume of urine produced, which can contribute to dehydration. However, Morton turns this into a positive thing, saying that it helps to induce urine and therefore is a good drink for those with stones. Finally, he said it is a good aid to end drunkenness. Now that we know the health benefits of coffee, I thought it might be interesting to try some coffee roasted and brewed in the early modern style. So I've got some coffee from North Africa, which is where we would have had strong trade links, and then roasted it in a pan above a barbecue to kind of represent their kind of pan roasting that they would have done above a fire, and then brewed for an extended period of time in water as they would have done I use the hob and tap water, whereas they would have used the fire and river water. It's not very nice, but it does show the kind of hot, black, sweet drink that they would have drunk. Okay. Now on to the negative effects of coffee. 4 years later, in 1674, a group of women published a pamphlet entitled The Women's Petition Against Coffee, which they say is the humble petition and address of several thousands of buxom women languishing in extremity of want. The pamphlet expresses their feelings that because of the rise of coffee houses in England, they have been left unsatisfied by their men, who in former ages would justly esteem their ablest performers, but to their unspeakable grief they find of late the decay of the old English vigour, and that their gallants have been so very way Frenchified that they have become mere cock-sparrows, which shows that for one reason or another the men of early modern London are losing their sexual appetite. The pamphlet goes on to say how a prince of Spain was forced to make a law that men should not repeat the grand kindness to their wives above 9 times in a night. But those forward days are gone, and the men are not capable of performing those devoirs which are their duty and the women's expectations exact. The women blame the coffee houses, saying that it's the continual sipping of this pitiful drink that is enough to bewitch men of 22 and tie up the codpiece point without a charm, which shows that they believe it to be the fault of the coffee. However, it may also be down to the women's exclusion of the coffee houses that they blame the coffee, and that therefore they do not realise that the men are becoming more interested in their own quest for their own personal knowledge and enlightenment, which is aided by the culture of the coffee houses, and they are becoming less interested in the pursuit of pleasure. The women wish that the men of the 17th century would leave the coffee houses and return to the taverns, and that drinking coffee should face severe penalties, saying, "We humbly pray that you trusty patrons would improve your interest, and henceforth the drinking coffee may, on severe penalties, be forbidden to all persons under the ages of 80, which would mean that only those considered past their sexual prime can partake in the drinking of coffee." Samuel Pepys's diary shows that he is both a highly passionate lover as well as a frequenter of coffee houses, and his visits are regularly mentioned in his diary for a number of different reasons, such as socially, as he meets with Mr. Cutler to go to a coffee house where they can discuss the likelihood of a war with Holland. He also has business meetings with people like Mr. Hill, a merchant who he describes as being a pretty, gentile, young and sober man, as well as meeting with the comptroller, saying that they have discoursed a number of matters. One of his business meetings shows the strong links between coffee houses and the shipping companies, as discussed earlier, where he meets with Gifford, Hudland and the master of a ship to read over and approve a charter party for the carrying of goods to Tangier, wherein he hopes to get some money. In another diary entry, he writes about a visit to a coffee shop in which 2 doctors are having a long and most passionate discourse about physics, which shows that for Pepys, the coffee house is not only a place for him to conduct his own meetings of his own interest, but for him to be a place to witness the discussion and learn about the new explorations in contemporary science. Pepys shows that he does feel some of the health benefits, as argued by Morton, showing both an increased appetite as well as stamina, as in one of his diary entries he talks of visiting a coffee house in the morning and then going home for a hearty dinner and later a hearty supper and staying up late into the evening in his office working. Whilst Pepys does show throughout his diary that he can certainly be promiscuous, there is one occasion in December 1664 where Pepys spends a considerable amount of time going from alehouse to alehouse looking for a woman with whom he has had a previous intimate experience. When Pepys cannot find this woman, he instead visits a coffee house so that he can engage his mind intellectually and therefore distract himself from this woman that he can't find. And the coffee house he visits, he has a discussion with some people in there about a great comet seen in several places by the men at sea and Lord Sandwich, and he then moves on to talk about how he's going to write to Lord Sandwich to ask him about the comet. This shows the coffee house to have the power to quench his sexual urges, as suggested by the women's petition against coffee. I hope you enjoyed my discussion about coffee in early modern London. I particularly enjoyed researching it because of my own interest in coffee. Have you got any questions?
I have a couple of questions. As we say, Crystal has 10, that's not really fair. Do you think that there's any kind of merit in this idea that coffee house is a place where knowledge was kind of being advanced, but it's also a kind of university of the streets?
I think that because it was a place where, for the distribution of a lot of the pamphlets at the time, such as, not the Observer, what's it called? There was a pamphlet that was distributed, but I can't remember its name, and it kind of kick-started a thirst for new knowledge, and kind of it was a place for men to meet and exchange ideas in a place that seemed a bit more controlled, not controlled entirely, but a bit more controlled than a tavern would have been.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the kind of clientele?
Partly in terms of the clientele, but also because the men were going in and then leaving still sober, that things hadn't really gotten out of hand whilst they were in there.
Right. Was there anything in the material you looked at, maybe not so much the diary perhaps, any kind of concern about the foreignness of coffee or anything like that? Because that was certainly the case when tobacco was introduced about 100 years previously.
For the women's petition, there was a lot in there about the kind of foreignness of coffee, and about it being strange and like a bitter kind of horrible product. And there's one bit that says that men kind of spend all their money and burn their mouths on this horrible bitter black liquid that's just foul. But in Robert Morton's piece, The Virtues of Coffee, he talks about the foreignness in a way that's kind of exciting. So he talks of like this mystery berry that comes from the land of the Arabs, where there's got all of these health benefits that these Arabs have been kind of lucky enough to have for hundreds of years, and now it's kind of England's turn to have a go with this berry.
Okay, thank you. Right, thank you very much. Soft boy, stop dancing around the cellar.